Hello, hope you're well. Let's get right into it. One of my most recent videos, I did the overrated albums list, and now I'm going to do the underrated albums list. That overrated video that I did ended up being pretty popular, or I shouldn't say popular. A lot of people clicked on it. I realize that might be the case, although it was more popular than I thought it would be. If you want to know how to be successful on YouTube, just simply put the Beatles in your title or Pink Floyd or Led Zeppelin or whatever. Just put a really well-known band or artist in your title and you will by default get tons of clicks and views. It's pretty simple. Human beings are bottom feeders for the most part. They just want to check the big bands and they want to have their own ideas and opinions verified. And yeah, it's a lot of those people who watched my video just wanted to make sure that I was not talking major shit about their favorite bands and artists. That validation's funny too because it's an overrated albums list. And I didn't even necessarily agree with all of your choices, but the one band that people were up in arms about was LCD Sound System. I thought that was funny, which kind of just proves my point in a way. I made an argument that LCD Sound System are a bunch of hipster douchebags and their music sounds like that, and therefore their fans are like that. And that was kind of the vibe I was getting from a lot of their fans. A lot of crybaby snowflakes were whinging and moaning about how dare I attack their favorite band? How dare you attack James Murphy? Well, I'm happy that you guys brought LCD Sound System up because I only talked about the bands you guys brought up. Those are the bands I put in the title. So I took a hit for you guys. You're welcome. But it's fun for me. But that LCD sound system take I had, people were pissed, man. People were calling me names and they were really upset about it. I think that's funny when people do that. But I took those comments off because I've said this before. I don't want people to get into the habit of calling anybody names. I think it's funny when I get called names because I put myself out there. I have to be ready for that to happen. That happens. Most people were very kind and courteous with their response because at the end of the day, this is just music, it's entertainment. But people take it really personally. When people come here to validate their own feelings and to rationalize the reasons why they think someone is their favorite artist or band, and you go against it, you rail against that artist or band, they take it really fucking personally. And that's what I find funny. Like some people were just up in arms that I dared criticize LCD sound system. I thought it was really funny. By the way, I wanted to invite you guys to respond to this person. Someone, I don't remember the exact words they used, but they basically said that New Order has never made anything remotely as interesting as LCD sound system or Neutral Milk Hotel. So have at it. Please go look at that comment and respond to it. I would love to hear the people who watch my channel regularly respond to that comment. I thought it was really funny. That's right, people. This person thinks that New Order, their collective output, all of the music New Order have ever made, is still not as good as Neutral Milk Hotel, that album they put out, the Airplane album. I thought that was really amusing. So I think I responded to it by saying you're delusional or something, but I left it at that. If you guys haven't seen that message, please go read it, go respond to it. Be nice if you do respond to it. Remember, no name calling. Be respectful, all right? I don't This person had an opinion, so I don't want it to be a full-on, full-fledged attack. But calmly and politely put that fucker in their place. For someone to say that New Order has never made anything as good as anything Neutral Milk Hotel has ever done, are you kidding? Is this a joke? Can you imagine living in a world where you thought that was true? Man, that'd be a very sad, depressing world indeed. But let's move on to the underrated albums now, shall we? I thought this list was interesting. You guys included some, well, not some, most of the albums you guys mentioned that I don't really agree with you on. And hopefully, this will be an interesting video for you guys. But I don't really agree with most of what you guys said. Maybe we have a different idea of what underrated means. I don't know. Um, to me, underrated kind of only exists in the world that that band exists, you know, and I'll try to explain what I mean by that. But there were only like one, maybe two albums in the whole list that I agreed with. Most of these other ones, I'm like, I don't know. I think these albums are right where they belong. I think they're rated perfectly, really. So let's get on with it. I'm not going to have a lot of preamble. Let's just move on to the most underrated albums list. The first one, I'm going to go in order as in order of how I got these messages. Excuse me, sorry. Um, Yesh, no. How's it going, dude? Yesh, no is always one of the first to respond, and he always has very well thought out, well constructed, well written responses. Yesh, no, thank you very much for existing. He keeps it to just one. Pancal, Gazella, I don't know. How do you say it? Who cares? We all know the album. It was the masterpiece that never got to be seen as one. It was as furious, hypnotic, and mysterious all in one, starting from the sinister bass line of I'm Lost to the thundering false drums that follow me. Adrian Sherwood produced this one, but it's the creativity of the band that shines through. I do like that album. In fact, you remind me that I want to do a video on this album. I want to do one on Pancow in general, but I want to try to condense it to one album for them and talk about the EPs that came out. Like when I do Gazella or Gisela here, I'll talk about like Freedom for the Slaves and Me and My Ding Dong, you know. I'll talk about those, but I don't know if it's underrated. I'll try to explain what I mean by this. See, when I think of underrated, I think of an album that everybody should know. Like it should just be across the board, undying true respect from everybody, you know. I think it represents something that can cross pollinate into all kinds of different genres. Something that should be, you know, a household name. And at least I feel like I can garner up an argument to it. With Pancow, I don't know. Like, I think Pancow exists in its own little world. I wouldn't want everyone to know about Pancow. Does that make any sense? Like if Pancow were a popular band or a top 40 band or whatever, we probably wouldn't like them as much, right? Well, the reason why we like Pancow is it's so unique, but I think it's very well loved in the industrial community. I think people love Pancow, that audience. But with Pancow, you either really love them or you hate them. There's really no in between. But I get it. I get what you're saying. I mean, you love that album. I think that people know what it is, don't they? Maybe I'm wrong about that. I could be wrong, Yeshno. I don't know. I feel like that album has been respected. So I don't know that I would rank it as underrated. I wouldn't want it to be any more overrated than it might be already. That might not make any sense, but I just don't agree that it's underrated. I think it's right where it should be. I wouldn't want it to be any more popular because then it would lose its edge. I think records that are as edgy as this album, even the album cover, I think it can only exist in a very tight niche of the music community, you know? And that's why it's cool. So I would disagree with you that it's underrated, actually. It's a great album. I'm not disagreeing with that take at all. I hope what I'm saying makes sense. And I feel this way about most of what you guys said when you mention your albums. I feel like they exist perfectly where they are. I wouldn't want them to be any more blown up or popular. So, yeah, when I say underrated, I just feel like there are albums that everybody should know. And Gisela, no, I want to keep that to myself. I don't want anyone, and not everyone could ever like that. We just don't live in a world where that could be any more overrated than it already might be, at least in the industrial community. Hopefully you can follow me what I'm saying. I'm sure I'm making no sense at all, but as much as I love that album, I would disagree that it's underrated. I mean, is it underrated in the industrial community? I feel like the people who watch my videos too, these kinds of bands are going to pop up. And they did too. And I'll get to those too. There were a couple of other mentions, at least uh, all of the industrial albums that got mentioned, I don't agree with you guys on, respectfully. And I'll talk about each one. But I love me some Pancow, man. I'll definitely talk about those guys. And now that I'm not bothering showing records, I have a lot more time to do these videos. Shaff. Oh, is this Shaffy? Is this you? Shaffy? My man in Jersey? Hope that's you. How's it going, man? Hope you're doing all right. Most of my favorite albums feel underrated. Okay, I did go through these. Laurent Garnier, Unreasonable Behavior. I like that album. I don't think it's underrated. It's just my opinion. I like it fine, but he was never my favorite artist. In fact, I think he's a little overrated. I'm sure I'll take some shit for this, but at least from Shaffy. Shaffy, give me all the shit you want. I've always thought he's a little overrated personally. Like, how many more reissues do we need of Crispy Bacon, for example? Like, I don't know. That song's okay. Is it that great? My cut from Garnier is Astral Dreams, and it's the LFO remixes. It's not his mix. It's those LFO remixes. Those are some of the best remixes I've ever heard. The LFO remixes. So I don't agree with you, but oh, also, guys, remember, I'd like to know why. Like, why do you think this? I did include that in the question. What are your most underrated albums and why? Most of you didn't put why. So it's kind of hard to discuss these in any length when I don't know why you're saying that. I can only guess. Some of you did include why, and I'll talk about that more in detail. But these, I don't know why these are in your unrated list. Underrated list. Yes, no, you got me saying unrated now. God damn, man. I'm just kidding. I'm giving you shit, but you know what I'm saying. Leon Bushwacka, Low Life. You'll have to explain to me why. I think that album's fine, but underrated. Tell me why. I wouldn't say it's underrated, but I would like to know why you think it is underrated. Pichet, Miles from Home, same with that. Vince Staples, honestly, I'd never heard that. I'd never even heard of Vince Staples. When I saw your comment, I went and listened to him. I don't get it, man. I tried. I tried. Not for me. That's all I can say. I can't say I don't want to disrespect you, Shaffy, or Vince Staples. I don't want to. I don't know enough about Vince Staples, but what I heard, I was like, yeah, not for me. Mad Lib, of course. Tell me why. ILS Soul Trader. Yeah, I like ILS. I remember in the early 2000s, I had a phase where I was playing a lot of electro music in my DJ sets, and I remember playing a lot of ILS. You know, if you just like electro and breaks and hyperkinetic dance music that's not trance or drum and bass, that's a pretty good solution. Tommy Guerrero, I'd never heard. A little bit of something. I checked him out. I checked out this album you mentioned. Again, I wasn't feeling it. So I'm gonna limit what I have to say about it. I really don't know anything about him. I'd never heard of him. I listened to the album you recommend. I wasn't feeling it. So again, tell me why. I'd love to know why. And then Scalpel Confusion. I listened to that. It was okay. But again, guys, tell me why. I would love to know because I wouldn't say those albums are underrated, but that's just my opinion. Young Gods, Only Heaven. Yeah, that's a good album. Why? Tell me why. Here we go. No, I like this. I like this comment because most of this I intensely disagree with, but then there's one I really agree with. Klaxons, Myth of the Near Future. Dude, I couldn't disagree with you more. I have heard that album, and it, again, just my opinion, I thought it was absolute shit. I thought it was terrible. Now, That album came out, what, 15 years ago, 16 years ago, something like that. So it's been a long time since I've heard it, but I do remember hearing it. And I was like, this is awful. You say it's amazing pop crossover record, dude. I couldn't disagree with you more. I don't know. It sounds like a bunch of boy bands farting in each other's faces. I'm sorry, it's awful. Terrible. Oof. Now largely forgotten. I would have to say good. But give me a reason why you think that it's underrated. Dude, I couldn't disagree with you more. I thought it was awful. Happy Mondays, Bummed and Pills and Thrills. Now this is where I can get behind you. In fact, of all the records everyone mentioned, Pills and Thrills is the album that I think should be a household name. I've already done a video on Pills and Thrills and Belly Aches. Hopefully you guys have watched that and you know how I feel about it. I think Pills and Thrills and Belly Aches is one of the greatest albums that's ever been made. I think it absolutely should be in the pantheon of all-time great albums, right up there with the best of anything you can think of. I just think it came out at a time that was so fertile for music. It crossed over into so many different things. It is a beautiful, perfect album. Please go back and watch my video on that album. You know, I go on about it for at least a half an hour, probably. I don't know how long that video is, but Pills and Thrills. I absolutely agree with you. Again, out of all the records you guys mentioned, this is the one that I absolutely agree on. There's an argument that it's not underrated. They've reissued it. It's been brought back to life a couple of times for new audiences. So in my mind, people, it's in that way, I can see an argument that it's not underrated. Anytime an album gets reissued, it's probably not all that underrated. There could be an argument that it's overrated. That's always an argument. But to me, in a perfect world, it wouldn't be Fleetwood Mac Rumors that gets reissued 50 times a year. It would be Pills and Thrills that gets reissued 50 times a year. But would I love it as much? If Pills and Thrills got overplayed to fucking death, like Fleetwood Mac or, you know, any of the albums we talked about, would we love it as much? Probably not. So, in a way, I think Pills and Thrills is perfect in its place. Bummed is a great album too, but it doesn't touch the brilliance of Pills and Thrills in my opinion. Bummed was the lead up. I understand that. That was the lead in to Pills and Thrills, but Pills and Thrills dropped and it was perfect. It's still perfect. They basically made the Manchester sound. And yeah, I agree. Definitely better albums than, okay, let's see. Not many young people know about them, and definitely better albums than the Stone Roses debut. That I don't know about. Now, someone else that mentioned Stone Roses, I'll talk about them more when I get to that one. But the first Stone Roses album, since you brought it up, I would say somehow that's still underrated. It's like it's been reissued a million times. That album is a absolute classic now, and somehow there's an argument that maybe it's still underrated. The first Stone Roses album is just one of those perfect albums, I think. It's absolutely timeless in a way that most albums are not timeless. Um, just an amazing piece of work. It still is. It gets better, which is rare. You can listen to an album so many times and it can get old and tired, but not Stone Roses, man. That first album is absolutely incredible, and it still is. It's just an incredible piece of work. Fun Loving Criminals. Okay. I mean, you said I may laugh at that one, and I did a little bit. I disagree with you big time on that one. No, they do nothing for me. Kellis and Nerd, all due respect, I feel the same way. Nah, nah. I think they're massively overrated. But again, just an opinion. And thank you for your comment. Pills and Thrills and Belly Aches. That I can get behind every single time. Now, here's a Stone Roses comment. Second Coming. I think it's actually better than the first one. I always think of the movie Shaun of the Dead. Did you guys see that movie? I'm assuming you did, where they're throwing the records at the zombies and they're pulling them out of the crate. Like they pull out Blue Monday and he throws it and he's like, "Oh man, come on, that was an original press," you know. For people my age, the Gen X generation, I mean, that movie was fantastic. Anything Edgar Wright does, the music he uses in his films, oh my God. Like when I went and saw World's End in the theater, I was shitting my pants. The music he was using, I was like, oh my God, this is like my youth, man. This is my soundtrack right here. But in Shaun of the Dead, he mentioned he pulls out Second Coming and he's like, they're trying to decide which records to throw. Like, no, no, don't throw that one. No, don't throw that one. He's like, yeah, throw it, throw it. Like he pulls out a Sade record. He's like, yeah, throw it. Um, I actually like Sade, but Stone Roses, he pulls out Second Coming. He's like, Stone Roses. And he goes, no. He goes, Second Coming. He goes, I like it. I thought that was a great scene. Anyone who was around when this album came out, you understand that joke. You have to understand if you weren't around then, the first Stone Roses album hit the earth like a meteor. It just was like bam, slammed into the side of the planet and changed everything. And between 1989 and 1995, right, there was like a 5.5 year period where people were obsessed with what the Stone Roses were going to do next. There were constant news updates and what are they doing and where are they and what kind of music are they coming up with. I mean, there was massive hype behind this record because of just how meteoric the first album was. So when the Second Coming came, in my opinion, it just by nature it had to flop a little bit. It could never ever ever be what we expected it to be after the utter sheer brilliance of the first album. Never. But the fact is, The Second Coming is a really good album, I think. It's just not the same. The first Stone Roses album has such a unique sound. It came out at a certain time. It captured the zeitgeist of the time. There were very, very, very few albums in history that are able to perfectly pull that off. And that album did it. It was an accident. You don't ever see this shit coming. That's why these albums are so huge. And The Second Coming was doomed to failure. But it is a good album. It's good. I agree with you. It is underrated. I do agree with you on that. And more people should appreciate it. I probably agree with that. Now, I definitely do not agree with you that it's better than the first one. I think Second Coming is just more of like a traditional rock album, which there's nothing wrong with that. But the first album that's a rock album too, but it's so different. There's no other record on the face of this earth that sounds like that first Stone Roses album. So I respectfully disagree that it's better than the first album, but you're right. It is a good album. Here's one. Yeah, I don't know if I agree with this one wholly, but I love the album. I'm not sure it's underrated and has perhaps grown a bigger following over the years, but in terms of Japanese electronic music, I feel that Susumu Yokota's album Sakura is a relatively unheralded classic. Yeah, that's a really good album. Um, it's so funny too, Yokota, you couldn't give his records away 20 years ago. Like, in fact, 3 or 4 years ago, I had a couple of copies of Sakura and I sold one for I think $300 or some stupid price. I mean, someone bought it for that. I thought, well, let's see if I can get this for it. And I did. I was like, wow. Mine was untouched, so that might have something to do with it. But still, this guy, his records you cannot find anymore. They're really hard to find, and you couldn't give them away when they first came out. But so what? I'm glad people have rediscovered this guy. Is he underrated? I don't think he is anymore. His stuff is getting reissued, and people have definitely had a huge resurgence toward checking him out. So um, maybe to some degree, some of his albums are underrated. I get that. Like maybe Sakura. You could be right. Yeah. But I do think in recent years, people have definitely discovered him. So I would say he used to be really underrated, but not so much anymore. I think people have definitely tuned into what he was doing. And if you guys don't know Susumu Yokota, go check him out. He's long dead now. He died years ago, but he made everything from ambient to like borderline classical music to just straight up acid techno. Like he was all over the place. He put out a lot of music on a lot of different labels. He was around for a good 15, 20 years, and then he died. And ever since then, people have kind of been scrambling to find his stuff because it's not easy to find. They have been reissuing a lot of it. And he records under different names, so research him. But yeah, I love Yokota for sure. Let's see. How long have I been going here? 25 minutes. God, time flies by, man. So, okay, here is where I disagree with you guys. And I'm sure the skinny puppy faithful will get pissed off at me, but whatever. It's just my opinion. This guy has the process, and I think someone else might have mentioned it too. Um, I don't think anything Skinny Puppy has done is underrated. I think Skinny Puppy exists perfectly in the realm of where they should be. I mean, think about it. If they again, when I think underrated, it means that an album should be more popular. But if Skinny Puppy was a household name, would you like them as much? Like they wouldn't be as good as they are if everyone knew who they were, if everyone appreciated them. Skinny Puppy, there's no middle ground with them. That's what's brilliant about them. Like you either love them or you hate them. And those are always the best artists because Skinny Puppy has a lot to say and they're very intense and they're very confrontational. And so I don't think that any Skinny Puppy record is more overrated or underrated than it should be. Especially the process. I don't agree with you, Magnus. By the way, hi Magnus. I love you, man. I hope things are going well for you. In Sweden, right? You're Swedish? I think he's in Sweden. I don't agree with the process, man. I think it's right where it should be, toward the middle bottom of the pack for Skinny Puppy albums. And you guys know I love Skinny Puppy. I've done more than enough videos on them. You guys know how I feel about these guys. I think the process is one of their weakest albums. Sorry, I just do. Um, and I definitely think it's right where it needs to be. I don't think people generally think of that album being one of their best. Now, you're not saying it is their best. You're just saying that it's underrated, but in the realm of what? Compared to what? I think it's right where it should be. I think in the industrial community, Skinny Puppy is absolutely worshipped. People love them. People listen to them over and over and over and over and over and over again, and I think they're right where they need to be. Skinny Puppy is in a perfect place. I think that's why they're so damn good, and they have such a rabid, faithful following that is pretty large. They have a huge following. They really do. So is the process, you're not asking me if I think it is, but I think it's right where it should be. I don't think it's underrated. But I thank you, Magnus, as always. I love you, Magnus. Stranglers, Black and White, should be rightly described as arguably the first post-punk album, if not the first popular. Yeah, as I mentioned in past videos, I'm not big on the term post-punk, but I understand it needs to be used. And people love calling the Stranglers in general just post-punk, but whatever. I don't even think they're punk. I think the Stranglers are the Stranglers. Now, when you're thinking of punk bands, you always think of the Clash and the Pistols. I put the Stranglers right up there with them. In fact, I like the Stranglers more. I mean, if we're talking about bands that we've listened to more than any other band in that genre, Stranglers would be my number one. I've listened to the Stranglers well more than the Clash and the Pistols. It, it, I'm not slamming the Clash or the Pistols, all right, but I love the Stranglers. To me, the Stranglers are more punk than those bands are because they just did what the fuck they wanted. They didn't even care or pay attention to what they were being branded as. They didn't care. They just got on with it. And that's what John Lydon did. He made that one Pistols album and then he went off and did Public Image Limited. He did Metal Box, which is like a dub disco album, and then he put out, Public Image. I'm not going to go through all their albums now. I will eventually. I love PIL. But that's what punk bands do. They don't make some fucking tired old garage rock sound like Green Day does. The fact that people think Green Day are punk is hilarious to me. No, they're not. If they were punk, they'd be making more than one sound for 30 years. Every fucking time they make an album, it sounds exactly the same. No, that is not punk. They're out there making Target commercials and stuff. Yeah, that's punk rock. No, please. Stranglers, to me, are the ultimate idea of what punk rock is. Punk really isn't a sound to me, it's an approach, it's a thought process, it's an ethic. And the Stranglers absolutely do that. So, Black and White, I don't know. It's hard for me to say if that's underrated. I fucking love that album, man. I'm with you. I love that album. Is it underrated? I don't know. You think it is, and I respect that. In terms of like Stranglers albums, I don't know where it ranks. Maybe in that way it's underrated, but I don't know. I should look at what people generally think to be their best album. Led into Gold, Age of Reason. Okay, why? Why do you feel that way? You got to tell me why, man. That album's fine. It's not my favorite. I wouldn't think of that as underrated necessarily, but you need to tell me why. Ian, what's up, dude? I always love seeing Ian's face. This dude always has interesting, funny things to say. Always love to see him making comments. Ian, my man. Ian, I forget where are you again? You're in the UK, right? You're a British fella, I think. Will it be controversial? The Stranglers, the Gospel according to the Men in Black. Yeah, I have to agree with you on this. See, this is what I kind of agree on. I think even in within Stranglers fans, it's it's underrated, right? People tend to think of like their first three or four albums to be their best, but I would put this way up there, maybe in the top three. I think this album even confounded Stranglers fans at the time, right, Ian? Am I getting that wrong? I think you might be older than me, so you would know better than me. I wasn't around when this fucking album came out, so but from what I've heard, I think I first heard that album, well, I mean, shit, late 80s, early 90s, so it had been out for a while before I got to it. But Jesus, yeah, like you said, songs about religion and aliens. I mean, it is a cool, weird, bizarre, one of a kind record. Only the Stranglers. And yeah, I think even Stranglers fans at the time were like, what the fuck? What is this? Is this the same band? Again, that's pretty punk rock to me. Every time Stranglers put out a record, it was like, what? What is this? I mean, that's the best thing you can do, I think. As a musician, as an artist in a band, that's the best thing. So Ian, you could tell me better if that album confused even Stranglers fans at the time. I hope you're doing well, Ian. Always good to see you. All right. Azillarod, Liz, how are you, man? I love me some Liz. Good old Liz. Liz always has important things to say. I always am excited to see what she has to say, and I disagree with everything she put on here. Liz, I love you, but I disagree with everything here, and I hope I make some sense. Chris Connolly, yeah, I don't agree. His entire solo discography, that man is my Barry White. Hey, fair enough, man. I can't argue with that. Please check out Phenobar Bombalum. Is that what that says? Phenobar. I haven't heard that. I recently saw a reissue. Or wait, is that no? Oh no, I have heard that. Is that the one with the dark cover, like a black cover, and he's sitting there, he's all moody? Is that the one? I have heard that. He could sing the instructions for how to give yourself an enema, and I'd love it. Well, ask him. I'm sure he takes requests. Maybe he might fulfill that request for you, but I don't know, man. I've tried Chris Connolly solo stuff. I can't do it. I don't know. I respect him, obviously. I mean, I like his talents and I like him. He's an interesting fella, but I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you have definitely made it clear why you feel this way. So it is what it is. I do not share your enthusiasm for his solo work. I really don't listen to him at all, other than when he's with Ministry. Ogre, Ogre's work is. I have to disagree with you on this one. I am sorry, but I can't get behind you on this one. His solo albums, I can't get through them, man. And his production, like I've heard that, Sunny Passop or whatever album that's called, whatever it's called. Dude, I couldn't get through it, man. I thought the production was bad. I know, obviously, we have to disagree on something, right, Liz? But no thanks, man. I couldn't do it. The later Ogre stuff, I always love Ogre and I respect him vastly, but I can't get behind his solo stuff. His message, obviously, I love him and his art and his messages. I'm not railing against him. I never would do that. It's just my preference is that I don't prefer his solo albums at all. In fact, I think his solo albums sound like a lot of later Skinny Puppy, which I just don't like. Section 25 from the hip. Oh, sorry, I want to get back. I'll throw in the entire discography of Ogre as being underrated. My only gripe is there's not a release of this particular album on wax. Okay. Yeah, I have heard that album. I think I just heard it on Apple Music a few years ago. I'd heard bits and pieces of it, and then I went back and listened to it, and I was like, yeah, not for me, man. Section 25 from the hip. Oh, that voice down flows so beautifully. My favorite track is the ethereal and so danceable. Looking from a hilltop. This band should have been bigger. I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know. They're okay. They're okay, and they've been reissued a few times, so I don't know if they're underrated. It seems like they're rated right where they should be, right? No, they're a factory band, by the way. If you guys don't know, they are good. I'm not saying out of all the albums you list here, I like that one the best. Um, but I don't know. Are they underrated? I don't know. And then again, okay, this is where the process came in again. And the greater wrong of the right. Yeah, I just mumbled about all that. I would say that if the process had to be their final record, I have been all right with that. I don't get the dislike, but we're all entitled to our own views. This album has aged well. Has it? Has it, Liz? I don't know. There are several standouts in this one. Love my absolutely favorite record from them, and they did it. Wow, really? Your favorite? Oh wait, I like how they revisited the heavy guitar like they did with Rabies, my absolute favorite record. Oh, Rabies is your favorite. Okay, well, I can get behind you. I can get behind that. I agree with you on that. I feel the same way about the greater wrong of the right, man. I cannot do it. I thought that the way they like use the current day sampling, vocalizing, even auto tune techniques, it was really cheesy and bad. Poor choice there. I thought, listen, I thought I've been clear about this in my videos, but I thought Skinny Puppy was blazing their own path all the way up through Last Rites. They weren't following paths, they were blazing them. They were frontiersmen. They were creating space where there was none. And then everything post Last Rites, I felt like they were following other people's paths. That's not what Skinny Puppy did. That's what let me rephrase that. That's not what they did well. The reason I love them is because nobody ever sounded like them. Everything they did up through the 80s and early 90s, they were just on their own planet. But then after Last Rites, they changed, man. And we know why they changed to some degree. Members died and they had to move on and they had to change something. I get it. That's what they were always about, changing. I just don't prefer the way they changed. The greater wrong or the right, I have a hard time listening to that. I've tried several times and I just think it's too much like everything else. And that's not why I love Skinny Puppy. Those 80s albums and the first two albums in the 90s, the early 90s. I'm sorry for I've been sick this week, people. All right, give me a break. Um, the greater wrong, the right, yeah, I can't. Um, yeah, I'm not gonna harp on it, but I'm sure you Skinny Puppy fans obviously are gonna be offended by this, but whatever. You guys are used to me being crass and having stupid opinions. Not my favorite. I've tried. Yeah, it's funny that we disagree so harshly on the production, really, on the Ogre too. Like, really, you think the production's good? Man, I couldn't disagree with you more. I think it's really bad, really kind of lazy and cheesy and goofy, and I don't know. It's just not what. It sounds very musically. I don't mean lyrically, but I think musically it just sounds very kind of surface level, almost kind of cheap, rushed. That's just Just my opinion. Kevin Ayers, Shooting at the Moon. I have to say, I don't know Kevin Ayers enough to really fully have an opinion. I have sure heard Shooting at the Moon at some point in the past, but not enough to really have an opinion. So I'm going to reserve opinion on that because I just honestly I don't know enough about his stuff. I know that those of you who don't know, he was a 60s, 70s guy. He made a lot of avant-garde, almost jazzy psych rock. So he had a definite sound, but I haven't heard enough about it to really have you know, informed opinion about it. All right, man, 40 minutes. Jesus, I got to wrap this up. So, Liz, thank you as always. I appreciate your comment. At the end, you asked me what are some of my choices. So this is thank you for asking, by the way. I was going to give them to you anyway, but I'm glad someone asked. These are my three choices. Now, these are three albums that one of them has been reissued, but only in Japan. I still don't think many people have heard this. And the other two are just albums that came and went, and they've never been reissued. And I don't think hardly anyone's ever heard of them, much less even heard them. One of them maybe people have heard of, but these are albums that I think absolutely everybody should hear. And I really hope you guys take the time to go listen to these albums. I think they're all on Apple Music. Two of them are. I'm going to mention three here. Let me pull up Apple Music here and check to see if this album is in the Apple Music library. And you can find everything on YouTube as well. I mean, if you can't find it, it's going to be there. There it is. Okay. If you have Apple Music, you have no excuse. You have to hear these albums. They're all there. All three of these. Okay. And I'll try to, I'm sorry this is so long, man. I'm going on almost 45 minutes here. I'll try to wrap this up. None of these are ranked in any specific order, but my first one I'm going to mention is The All Seeing Eye. The name of the album is Pickled Eggs and Sherbet. All Seeing Eye, Pickled Eggs and Sherbet. Listen to this album. No one's heard this album. I don't know how it happened. When the album got released 25 years ago, it is celebrating its 25-year anniversary this year. When this album came in 1999, it kind of came and went. I don't know that anybody really listened to it then. But this is an album that when it came in 99, I loved it then. I still love it. I listen to this album on the regular, maybe once a month. This album just makes me happy. It is produced and mixed and engineered and delivered with absolute precision. It has a very interesting theme. It doesn't sound like anything you ever heard before. The All Seeing Eye, Pickled Eggs and Sherbet. Check it out. To my knowledge, it never got released on vinyl. It only came out on CD, maybe cassette. I don't know. Maybe there's a tape out there. But as far as I know, it only came out on CD. It is on Apple Music. You can stream it. Please check this album out. I really don't think that you will be regretting this decision if you decide to listen to it. One of the guys in the band, too, his name's Richard Barrett. And you Royce and Murphy fans might know this name. He goes by the name Parrot, or he used to at least. He produced not the most recent Murphy album, but the one before that. What was it? Crooked Machine, which I thought was excellent. That album sonically sounds the way it does because of Richard Barrett. And he was the mastermind behind The All Seeing Eye. He also recorded with Richard Kirk. You know who Richard Kirk is from Cabaret Voltaire. You Kirk fans out there, if you like Sweet Exorcist, and you probably already know this, Richard Kirk recorded with Barrett in Sweet Exorcist. There are two guys, Kirk and Barrett. So if you like Sweet Exorcist and you like Richard Kirk and you like that kind of 90s electronic, quirky electronic techno house sound, check out All Seeing Eye. It is brilliant. Love this album. And nobody knows this. No one I've ever talked to has ever listened to this album. Most people have never even heard of it. So I really hope the majority of you have never heard this album. Go treat yourself. It is a really funny album too. Most of the lyrics were written by Jarvis Cocker. of Pulp, who I love. I love Jarvis Cocker more than I love Pulp. There's plenty of Pulp music that I enjoy, but I do love Jarvis. How can you not love Jarvis? He's one of those guys that I think he's hilarious, and he's a great lyricist. And his lyrics have never been better than the lyrics you will find on Pickled Eggs and Sherbet. And he actually sings on one song on the album. Excuse me. They're all from Sheffield. He's Richard Barrett's from Sheffield. I think the other two guys in the band are from Sheffield, and Jarvis Cocker himself, Chef. What is it? Sheffieldian? Is that what you call them? He is a Sheffieldian. That's what I'm calling them today. But check out the All Seeing Eye, Pickled Eggs and Sherbet. And they released a number of 12 inches in the late 90s too. They had their own label called the Earth label. Of course, I have all these records, but they would release these songs, and a lot of the songs that got put out on those early 12 inches would end up on this album, but they were different versions. The versions you find on the records are actually longer than what you find on the album. And there are tracks on the vinyl that weren't on the CD, and there are tracks on the CD that weren't on the vinyl. It's a fun album to dig into. There are lots of songs that exist on other formats and different versions. It's a very fun album to discover. So I sincerely hope you guys check this album out. I absolutely love it. I was just listening to it the other day. God, it's good. It's really funny, really well done. Let me know if you listen to it, and if you do listen to it, let me know what you think. Love that album. My second choice is from Ray or Rai. I don't know how to say the first name. Rai Harakami, Lust. This person is dead. Rai Harakami died, shit, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, so long dead. They did reissue Lust about 6 or 7 years ago in Japan only, so it's still not very easy to find. In fact, when they reissued it, they reissued it on vinyl. I think originally it only came out on CD. They reissued it on vinyl in Japan, and I worked at Discogs at the time, and we had a Japanese employee, and I had to have her go get it for me because I couldn't find it. I looked all over the internet, I just couldn't find it. I was like, "Hey, Erico, could you go get me that record?" And she's like, "Sure." So she went and found it, no problem. I had to have it bust over from Japan. It was the only way I could get it. But Rai Harakami, Lust. Check this album out. It's one of the most massively underrated electronic albums you'll ever hear. I mean, when you consider the electronic albums that are widely heralded and loved and beloved, you have to listen to Lust and wonder why more people haven't heard it. Maybe it's because it's a Japanese only release. I don't know. Listen to this record. It's absolutely brilliant. Some of the most emotionally warm electronic music you'll ever hear, I think. Those of you who like electronic music in any of its forms should absolutely check this out. And last but not least, and I hope you industrial fans are listening to this because you need to listen to this album, even though it's not really industrial. No, it's not really industrial at all, but MC 900 Foot Jesus, One Step Ahead of the Spider. MC 900 Foot Jesus, One Step Ahead of the Spider. This is one of my all-time favorites. This is a very particular and peculiar album. Even the record label didn't quite know what to do with it. In 1994, it just kind of came and went. And the fact that it's been out for 30 years now is crazy to me. But it's such a bizarre, unique, singular album that I don't think anyone knew what to do with it at the time. Mark Griffin, the guy who is One Step Ahead of the Spider, he was kind of known as this fringe electronic industrial guy with his first album, Hell with the Lid Off, which, by the way, is an amazing album. In fact, I should do an MC900 Jesus video at some point because I think Mark Griffin is a vastly talented guy and not mentioned enough. Hell with the Lid Off came out, had some industrial vibes to it, hip hop, techno. It was just like, it was a weird mesh of all kinds of stuff. And then his second album came out, Oh God, I can't even remember the Welcome to My Dream. Was that the name of it? Right? Well, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of this album. I've listened to the album 100 times. Welcome to My Dream, right? That album was pretty popular. It yielded a couple of big singles like The City Sleeps and The Killer Inside Me. Great album, fantastic album. But one thing really came to fore on that album, and that was Mark Griffin's ability to be a storyteller. He was really influenced by jazz more than anything, but I think he was very taken with industrial and hip hop and techno, and so he meshed all those things together. And the first two albums were very much a product of that jazz and dance music coming together and industrial. Now, One Step Ahead of the Spider wasn't anything like the first two albums. It was very much a jazz album. It was very jazzy. And that was his background. He was kind of a jazz aficionado. And it's still dancing in its way, but it's very much an atmospheric storytelling jazz album, almost like a Tom Waits album in some ways. That's what I thought of when I first heard it, because I love Tom Waits, by the way. Tom Waits is one of my favorite, all-time favorite singers and songwriters. When I hear One Step Ahead of the Spider, I hear like a slightly electronic, jazzy version of Tom Waits. Mark Griffin is a master storyteller. He's really funny. He's a great instrumentalist, and he's a great songwriter. And One Step Ahead of the Spider is one of those albums that I just don't think people have ever really known what to do with. It exists on its own planet. Nothing sounds like it. Nothing. Nothing I've ever heard. It is absolutely unique. And if you've never heard it, please go listen to it. It is on Apple Music. So it's easy to find. You don't have any excuse to not listen to it. So if you trust my opinions at all, and I assume that you do if you're here, go listen to this record and let me know what you think. I absolutely love this album. Again, when I worked for Discogs, I wrote a piece about this album talking about how I thought it was underappreciated and underrated. Mark Griffin, the guy who wrote it, after the album kind of flopped, he disappeared. He became a pilot and he worked at Borders Books, and he's still around, I think. He's from Dallas, Texas, I think. He's from Texas. I know that much. I think he's based out of Dallas. He might be from Dallas, but I think he's from Texas either way. But yeah, you'd hear these rumors and rumblings like he's a manager at a Borders bookstore now, or he's a pilot, he's an airline pilot. I think around the time that I wrote my piece on One Step Ahead of the Spider for Discogs, he was doing some shows again in Texas somewhere. Liz, maybe you can back me up on this. Do you know him? I mean, not know him personally, but do you know of his music? Because I remember he put on like this little mini tour in Texas about 6 or 7 years ago, and then to my knowledge, he disappeared again. So I don't know if he's disillusioned with the record business or music business or whatever, but this guy's an immensely talented musician and songwriter. And before I go much longer here and get up over an hour long, I just wanted to throw this out there. Listen to One Step Ahead of the Spider. These are my underrated album lists, and I appreciate your lists. Now, if you did mention an album and you didn't mention why, again, please tell me why, because it's hard for me to comment on it. If you just say the album, I don't, I guess when I see an underrated album inclusion, I think it's got to be compared to something else, maybe. I don't know. Everyone, to me, it's the personal story behind this. Like if you think a Young Gods album is underrated, why? Why do you think that? Because I don't necessarily think their albums are that underrated. I think they have a really rabid fan base, but you can tell me why you think that. So I'm going to shut up now. But thanks for watching. And thank you for making my overrated videos so popular because I didn't bring those albums up. You guys did. Again, all you need to do is put Pink Floyd or Beatles in the title of your video and you're going to get people watching your videos by default. It's pretty much that simple. So anyway, I thank you. I love you. I appreciate you and I'll talk to you next time. Goodbye.